Hello, my fellow Immortals, and welcome to The Source. I'm your host, Russell Nash, and this is the #1 spot for Highlander the card game, as well as all other Highlander-related material. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the best support cards that I think you should be including in any of your decks. These cards are universal, meaning they can go with any Immortal and in any type of deck. Most of these cards are going to be edge cards. Now, I do have a situation as well as a couple of different events. Now, if you remember from my last video on how to play Highlander, the difference between an edge card and a situation or an event is that edge cards are not considered special cards, and situations and events are considered special cards. You can only play one special card per turn in either your defense phase or your attack phase. But you can play as many edge cards per turn as you'd like and in any phase. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first card we're going to be talking about is called Alertness. Now, there are many different types of alertness in Highlander, and we're going to cover 4 of them. This first alertness is going to allow you to be able to dodge an undodgeable attack. This is a very good card to have in any deck, just for the simple fact that it's going to allow you to get around a pretty big stipulation that your opponent is going to try to put you in. So just being able to dodge an undodgeable attack is very strong in my opinion. And I tend to have more than one of these in my decks. I'm the kind of player that likes to dodge a lot, and I don't really like it when I can't dodge. So when my opponents throw out undodgeable attacks, I always make sure to have an alertness dodge in my deck. I tend to have more than one. Sometimes I have 3 or more. That's kind of like a personal preference. It just depends on how dodge heavy you are. This is a really great card. If you really like to dodge like me, I would definitely include this card in your deck. Just being able to dodge an undodgeable attack is very good. It can get you out of a sticky situation, and it can really save the day. You could have 0 blocks in your hand and you can't block the attack, and the attack says that you can't dodge it, and you could have 3 dodges in your hand, and if you lay down this alertness in your defense phase and then play your dodge, you're going to be just fine. This card is very strong, very good in my opinion. It can go in any deck with any Immortal. I highly recommend this card. I couldn't recommend this card anymore. Even if you don't like to dodge a lot, I would at least put one of these in your deck. Very good, highly recommend it. The next card we're going to be talking about is also titled Alertness. Now, this alertness is something I like to call super alertness. If you read the text of this card, it has an added bonus that if your opponent has a card in play or an effect in play which restricts you from playing a dodge from your hand, you can go ahead and play this alertness card and then dodge that attack as normal. But it also has a stipulation on the card that says you can't play a special card this turn. So I think that's actually pretty balanced, considering the fact that if your opponent has an effect in play which is restricting you from playing a dodge from your hand, you can play this card and then dodge. You just can't play a special card. Now, it's going to really be up to you whether or not you like the regular alertness dodge or the super alertness dodge. If you're a player who likes to use a lot of special cards in your deck, you're going to really have to make that choice. I can't make that choice for you. I'm someone who doesn't really rely too heavily on special cards, so I tend to use just the regular alertness dodge. But the super alertness is really good because it has that extra benefit of the text saying that if your opponent has an effect in play or has played a card that restricts you from playing a dodge from your hand, you can still play a dodge as normal. So I highly recommend this card. It can go in any deck. It can be used with any Immortal. It's really just going to come down to personal preference of which one you would prefer to have in your deck, just the regular dodge or the super alertness. Because the regular alertness dodge is just going to be allowing you to dodge an undodgeable attack. If your opponent has an effect in play which restricts you from playing a dodge from your hand, you're not going to be able to play the regular alertness dodge against that attack. You could still make an exertion, which I covered in my last video, but you're not going to be able to play a dodge from your hand. That's where the super alertness would really save the day. I can't make that decision for you. They're both great cards. The super alertness is one of those to where it's going to come down to your personal play style. If you like to play a lot of special cards, I would tend to go with the regular alertness. If you don't really like to play a lot of special cards, then I would tend to go with the super alertness, because you're not going to really be worried about playing a special card that turn, and you can still play a dodge from your hand. So that's really good. I highly recommend this card. Personal preference, it's up to you, but this card can go in any deck with any Immortal. Highly recommend it. Very strong card. The next card we're going to be talking about is also titled Alertness. Now, this alertness is exactly like the regular alertness dodge, except this card is going to allow you to block an unblockable attack. So for example, your opponent plays an attack, and that attack says this attack may not be blocked. What you'll do is your defense phase will come and you will play this edge card, and then you'll play your block as normal. If you're someone who doesn't really like to play that many dodges and you like to rely more on blocks, I highly recommend including this card in your deck. And even if you are someone who likes to dodge a lot, I would highly recommend putting at least one alertness block in your deck, because you never know when you're going to have the dodge that you need in your hand, and you might not have that dodge, and you might only have blocks in your hand, and your opponent may throw out an unblockable attack. And it's really good to be able to get around a lot of those stipulations and situations that your opponent's going to put you in. So being able to block an unblockable attack is very strong. I would include at least one of these in your deck, if not more, if you are the type of person who likes to block a lot and you don't really want to be restricted from blocking. So this is a very good card. Highly recommend. Universal. It can go in any deck and used with any Immortal. Highly recommend this card. Very, very good. The next card we're going to be talking about is exactly like the super alertness dodge, except you probably already guessed it. It just does the same thing, but different. It allows you to block an unblockable attack, or if your opponent has an effect or card in play which restricts you from playing a block from your hand, you can go ahead and play the super alertness block, and it's going to do the same thing that the super alertness dodge does. It's going to allow you to go ahead and block that attack as normal. You just won't be able to play a special card that turn, just like the other super alertness says. So these cards are very, very good. And like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be really up to you which one you prefer. Like I said, if you like to include a lot of special cards, I might go with the regular block. If you don't really like to include a lot of special cards, I would tend to choose the super alertness. Very good card. I highly recommend it. Like I said, it's going to be up to you. It has that added benefit of being able to play a block from your hand against an unblockable. You just won't be able to play a special card, but very good card, very strong, highly recommended. It's just a personal preference between what you like to use. A lot of special cards are not really, so you're going to have to make that choice for yourself, but it is a universal card. It can go in any type of deck, and it can be used with any Immortal. Highly recommend this card. Don't count it out. Definitely check it out. So this next edge card we're going to be talking about is called Flashing Blade. Now, what Flashing Blade is going to do is it's going to restrict your opponent from playing one dodge against multiple attacks. Now, that's really, really good if you're using a multi-attack deck because, as I mentioned in my previous video, one defense can block or dodge multiple attacks. Unless you have a card like Flashing Blade, where it says dodges will not avoid consecutive attacks, that's really good if you are using a weapon that allows you to make an additional attack, or you're playing a combination card that allows you to make an additional attack. This is going to make your opponent have to really think about what types of defenses that they want to use, because if they're a dodge heavy player, they're not going to be able to just play one dodge and get around all of those attacks. So this card is universal in any multi-attack deck. I highly recommend this card. It's definitely going to cause some problems for your opponent. It's going to make them think about what they have to do. And if you are using multiple attacks, you cannot get away without using this card. I would put at least 3 or 4 in my deck, sometimes even more, even to the max of 6 if I'm making multiple attacks per turn, 2 or more attacks per turn. I want to be able to throw out a Flashing Blade every single attack phase, so I can make sure that I put my opponent in a corner and make them really have to choose on how they're going to defend those multiple attacks. So I highly, highly recommend this card. It can go in any multi-attack deck. It should go in any multi-attack deck. Very strong card, very, very good. Highly recommend it. Don't sleep on this card. This is a really good card. Like I said, especially if you're looking for multi-attacks, very good card. Highly recommend it. So the next edge card we're going to be talking about is a lunge card. Now, this card is very strong if you like to use basic attacks. This card is and should be a staple in any basic attack deck that you build. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to rely on basic attacks, but if you do include these lunge cards and you play them with basic attacks, it's really going to cause some problems for your opponent, because what it's basically saying is that your opponent can block this attack as normal, but they can't dodge unless that dodge is from an exertion. It's not making the attack undodgeable because, like I said, they could make an exertion and find a dodge and avoid the attack by playing that dodge from the exertion. But what this card is going to do really is it's really, really going to make your opponent have to make a tough decision, because if they have a dodge in their hand and they don't have any blocks, they're really going to have to decide whether they want to take the damage or make an exertion in the hopes of finding a dodge. Especially if you're playing an Immortal like Slan Quince, where he can make a free power blow every single turn without an exertion. A good strategy to use would be make a power blow with Slan every single turn, use a basic attack, and play a lunge card with that. So what that's really going to do is it's going to force your opponent to either have to exert. I mean, they're really going to have to exert, because they can either play a block because the card says that they can block normally, but they're going to have to make an exertion to make that a power block. So they're going to be losing out on 5 cards from their endurance. So that's really strong. And if you're able to do that every single turn, you're really, really going to be putting some pressure on your opponent. Now, let's just say you're running Slan and you power blow and you lunge. If they don't have a block in their hand, they're going to have to make an exertion for a dodge, even if they have a dodge in their hand, because this card says they can't dodge unless it's from an exertion. So you're really, really making them think about what they have to do. If they have a block in their hand, they can play that block, but they'll have to exert to make it a power block. If they don't have a block in their hand, they're going to have to make an exertion for a dodge and hope that they find it. So it's a really, really good card. Even if you don't power blow, you would still really want to put this card in your deck if you're building a deck that revolves around a lot of basic attacks. You want to really cause your opponent a headache every single attack phase that you have. You want to put them in any kind of bad situation that you can, and basically adding that extra stipulation of them not being able to dodge is really going to throw some problems their way. Really great card. I highly recommend it if you're running a heavy basic attack deck. This is a universal card. It can go in any deck with any Immortal. It will help you 100% in almost any situation where you're using basic attacks. So I would highly recommend this card. It's a very good card, and I can't say enough about it. Very good card. The next card we're going to be talking about is called Reconnaissance, or Recon. Now, Recon is very good if your opponent has a location in play, and that location is just causing you problems. It's just bogging you down, or it's making you discard cards from your hand, or it's making you take damage if you don't do a certain thing on your turn. A Recon is going to allow you to be able to just ignore the effects of that location, and that's really, really strong. I would definitely highly recommend including at least one Recon in every deck. Being able to just simply ignore a location or the effect of a location is really strong for a turn, because sometimes all you need is just that one turn to cause some real damage or to even win the game. So being able to play this edge card and still be able to play your own special card that turn is very, very strong. If you remember from my previous video, you can play as many edge cards per turn as you want and in any phase, but you can only play one special card per turn. And being able to ignore a location and the effects of that location, play the other cards that you want, and then also play a special card. I mean, I can't say enough about that. Very strong. I highly recommend this card. I would run at least one of these cards in my deck. They will help you. Some locations are very strong. A lot of players like to build their decks around locations. So if you can simply ignore or just not even worry about the effects that your opponent's locations are trying to impose on you, that's really strong in my opinion, because it's basically saying, hey, I don't really care about your strategy. I'm going to run my own strategy, and you've got to deal with it. So couldn't recommend this card any higher. Very good card. It can go in any deck, universal, with any Immortal, any type of deck. It will come in handy, and it will save you. I highly recommend this card. Very, very good card. Very strong. Now, this next edge card we're going to be talking about is called Patience. And what this card is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to be able to redraw to your ability no matter what phase of play you're in. So let's say you're in your defense phase and you're looking at your hand or your ability, and you don't really see the combo that you want to see in your hand, that you want to play during your attack phase. You don't necessarily see that flashing blade that you want to have in your hand, because you're going to make multiple attacks. So what this card is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to get more cards from your endurance into your hand. And anytime that you can draw during your turn before your draw or discard phase is very, very strong in my opinion. Anytime that you can cycle your deck or your endurance before your draw or discard phase is very, very strong. Like I said, if you don't have those cards in your hand that you're looking for, this is going to allow you to get those cards, or hopefully get those cards in your hand. Very strong. Patience can go in any deck. Like I said, being able to just draw up to your ability before your turn is over and still be able to play cards, that is very strong. I mean, it can really save the day in some games. So I highly recommend this card. I highly, highly recommend it. Very good card. I would include at least one in your deck at the very least. You know, like I said, being able to just draw to your ability at any time before your draw or discard phase, very strong. It can get those needed cards in your hand, and it can really, really save the day. Highly recommend it. Very strong card. Very, very good. The next edge card we're going to be talking about is called Focus. Now, Focus is one of those cards kind of like Reconnaissance, where it's going to allow you to ignore the effects of a situation that your opponent has in play. Now, a situation has reoccurring effects. So every turn, just like a location, a situation is going to allow your opponent to be able to do something, or it's going to force you to be able to do something. And to be able to just get around that is very strong. A lot of times decks will be built around situations and locations. And like I said about the Reconnaissance card, being able to just ignore or nullify the effects of a situation that your opponent has in play is very, very strong. It's basically saying, I don't care about the theme of your deck. I don't care about your strategy. I'm just going to go around that and do what I want to do. And in my opinion, that is extremely crucial to Highlander and being able to have a successful deck. You don't really want to be bogged down by those locations and those situations. You want to either have your own situations or your own locations, or you want to really have these cards in your hand to be able to get around those situations. And Focus is a really, really good card because it can save the turn for you if your opponent has a situation in play and that situation is just a nightmare for you. This card is going to allow you to just ignore that situation. Now, it's only for one situation, but that's still really strong because sometimes your opponent, all they need is one situation in play and it can cause you some really big headaches. So being able to just get around that is very, very strong in my opinion. And sometimes, like I said, all you need is just one turn to either save yourself or win the game. So being able to get around that, I can't even say that enough. It's just, I highly recommend this card. Very, very strong card. I would put at least one of these in my decks. Every single deck. It's universal. It can go in any deck with any Immortal. Highly recommend it. Very strong card. Now, we're going to be moving away from the edge cards and getting into the special cards. And the first special card that I'm going to be talking about is called Misfortune. And this is an event card. So what this card is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to remove any object in play. So if your opponent has an object in play that's causing you some problems or, putting your back up against the wall, during your defense phase or during your attack phase, whichever one is better for you, you can play this card and you can immediately remove their object from play. And they're going to have to place that object in their discard pile, and the effects of that object are no longer going to bother you. So this is a very good card. Highly recommend this card. I have at least one Misfortune in every single deck that I build. It is universal. It can go with any Immortal. It can go in any type of deck. It doesn't really matter. This card is very strong. Sometimes you might want to include more than one, maybe two of them. That's really up to you. It is a special card, so you're only going to be able to play one special card per turn. So it's one of those things that you're going to have to kind of feel out in the moment, whether you can play this Misfortune this turn and it be the only special card you play that turn. But, with that being said, I highly recommend this card. You will find at least one Misfortune in every single deck that I make. Very strong card, being able to just make your opponent discard an object that they have in play. Very, very strong. Highly recommend this card. Like I said, you'll find at least one of them in every deck that I make. The next special card we're going to be talking about is another event, and this event is called Police. Now, what this event card is going to allow you to do is it's kind of like the Misfortune where you can remove any situation in play, just one situation, but that's still very strong. I mean, it's not going to nullify the situation like the Edge card does, it's going to just remove the situation from play. So your opponent is going to have to immediately discard their situation from play. Now, it is a special card, so you can only play one of them per turn, but if you have to get rid of a situation that's just killing you, it's definitely worth it. You will find at least one police in every single deck that I make. I cannot recommend this card enough. It's universal. It can go in any deck with using any Immortal. Being able to get rid of a situation that your opponent has in play is very strong. Like I said, sometimes people will build their decks around situations, or certain Immortals rely heavily on situations. So being able to just get rid of their situations, very strong in my opinion. It's going to definitely cause them some problems, because if they don't have another one of those situations in their hand or in their deck, and they're just relying on that one, and you remove that one from play and they have to place it in their discard pile, their game plan kind of goes out the window. They're going to have to be kind of, on the back foot at that point. So can't recommend this card enough. You will find at least one of them in my deck, every single deck, no matter what Immortal I'm using. Highly recommend this card. Very, very strong. Highly recommend it. The next event special card that I want to talk about is called a Watcher. Now, this card is going to allow you to heal, and being able to heal yourself in Highlander can save the day. I mean, you can be down to, 4 ability or less, and you only have 4 cards in your hand or less, depending on what your current ability is. Because if you remember in my last video where I talked about how to play Highlander, I detailed that your hand size is directly related to what your current ability is. So if your current ability is at 4, you can only hold 4 cards in your hand, and during your draw or discard phase, you can only draw up to 4 cards. So what this is going to allow you to do is it's going to give you 2 health back, and you play this card in either your defense phase or your attack phase. Now, it is a special card, so you can only play 1 per turn, but it's going to give you 2 health back, and then during your draw or discard phase, you're going to be able to draw 2 extra cards. If you only had 4 in your hand, now you're going to be able to draw 6, and your ability is going to go up to 6. So you're gaining life and you're gaining cards in your hand. That's very, very strong. Very, very strong to be able to gain ability and have the possibility of drawing more cards in your hand. Now, this card is restricted to just 2, and which is understandable because it is a very strong card. You don't want the game to be unbalanced where you're just healing yourself every single turn. You're down 4 health and you play, a Watcher every single turn, and before you know it, you're back up to 10 health. That's pretty unbalanced. So I think the restriction at 2 is very fair and very balanced. If you have 2 in your deck, that's a total of 4 ability or life that you can get back. And, let's just say, for example, you do run 2 in your deck. One turn comes, you play 1 during your defense phase. At the end of your turn, you're going to get 2 health. So you'll go up to 6 if you were at 4. And then let's just say you don't take damage the next turn and you play the second Watcher heal card. You're going to go from 6 to 8. And, if you just a couple turns ago, you were at 4. So having these cards in your deck is very strong. I highly recommend running at least 1 of these cards. Having the ability to just heal yourself for 2 and being able to draw 2 extra cards, it can really make the difference between losing the game and winning the game. So these cards are universal. They can go in any deck. They can go with any Immortal. I don't know anybody who doesn't like to get health back. So I highly recommend at least running 1 of these cards. It really, really can save the day. Very strong card, very good card. I would definitely check it out. Now, the last support card we're going to be talking about is a situation. Now, this situation is called Master's Advance. Master's Advance is basically a stipulation that your opponent is going to have to follow every single turn unless they play a police card and remove it from play. If they don't police this situation, they're going to have to discard a dodge from their hand for each dodge that they want to play. So let's just say, for example, you play Master's Advance and you're running a multi-attack deck. This card is going to cause some nightmares for your opponent because let's just say, for example, you play a Flashing Blade as well. And a Flashing Blade is an edge card. And you can play an edge card and a special card in the same turn. So you lay down Master's Advance, and then you play a Flashing Blade, and then you play your multiple attacks. Your opponent is going to have to be discarding dodges left and right to be able to play a dodge. I mean, that's very, very strong. Even if you're not running a multi-attack deck, Master's Advance is one of those cards that it can never hurt you. It can only help you, because even if you're not running multi-attack, if your opponent does want to dodge that one attack that you've thrown at them, they're going to have to discard a dodge to play a dodge. And that's very strong. Anytime you can get your opponent to discard a defense to have to play a defense, that's very, very good for you, because it just means that it's less defenses in their hand that they have to defend themselves. And the more defenses going in their discard pile, the better for you, because they're going to run out of defenses eventually. And they can only have so many dodges in their hand. And this card I highly recommend it. It is very strong, very good card. It can go in any deck. It's universal. It can go with any Immortal, multi-attack deck, single attack deck. It doesn't really matter. When you play this card, it's going to stay in play unless your opponent removes it, and it's going to cause them problems every single turn. It's just a really, really good card. I highly recommend this card. Like I said, it can go in any deck. I would not overlook this card. Very strong card, very, very good. Well, that really does it for some of the best support cards that I think you should be including in your deck. These cards, like I said in the video, they are universal, meaning they can go with any Immortal and in any type of deck. In almost all of my decks, you will find at least one of every single card that I went over today. Sometimes you're going to find more than one of these cards in my deck. There might be a time where I want to run 2 Master's Advance because my opponent might be policing my first Master's Advance, and I'm running a multi-attack deck and I don't want them dodging. So, I'm going to be running all 6 Flashing Blades, and I'm going to be running 2 Master's Advance. Sometimes I might even run 2 Police, because sometimes people want to run multiple situations, and you want to be able to either get around those situations, or you want to be able to just simply remove them. So every card that I talked about, I use them in every single deck. Being able to heal yourself, being able to get around situations, remove objects from play. These cards are invaluable, and they will help you every single time. It's just going to be one of those things where you're going to have to decide the ratio of how many you want to include in your decks. So if you're finding that, you have 4 Alertness dodge and you really only needed 2 or 3, that's just something you're going to have to learn from experience and playing the game. I can't give you an exact number of how many you should be running of each of these cards. The only number that I could give you would be at least 1 of each of these cards in every single deck. These cards will help any Immortal that you choose to play, and they will help any type of deck. A stall deck, a direct damage deck, a multi-attack deck. They're good for any deck in any situation. Highly recommend every single card that I went over today. They won't steer you wrong. They will always help you. I will be making some other videos on the more complex strategies of Highlander. I hope to have a deck building guide out soon. And tell me down in the comments who some of your favorite Immortals that you would like to see a deck profile of. Maybe some of your favorite villains from the show, from the television series or the movies, or maybe even some of your favorite Immortals, like Duncan or Connor, maybe even the Kurgan. Just tell me down in the comments who you guys would like to see a deck profile for, and I'll go ahead and get started on that. And I hope this video really helped you. These are some of the best support cards that I think you should be running. And definitely take a look at them. They will always help you. They won't hurt you. And I really thank you for watching this video. If this video helped you, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any future Highlander CCG content. Don't lose your heads out there. Be on the lookout for that next video. And remember, there can be only one collectible card game.